Cool. Hi, everyone. Welcome to episode 9 of Talent Acquisition Trends and Strategy. Today, we're joined by Laura Holcombe. Laura, welcome.
Hi, nice to be here. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for being here. I'm really excited to speak with you today. And before we jump into it, would you mind telling everybody a little bit about your background and what you're working on now?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I actually started off as a recruiter in 2019. I was working for a small agency in a town that I lived in called Norwich. Probably haven't heard of it, but it is a lovely place. So yeah, I cut my teeth in recruitment during the pandemic, and then I've been very, very lucky to move into in-house talent acquisition roles. Started off as an IC, and now I've just joined a company called Streetbees, where I'm heading up the entire talent acquisition function. So a bit of a step up for me, but I'm very much enjoying it. It's exactly the type of role that I really wanted to get my teeth into. So yeah, delighted to be here. Yeah, can't wait to chat about all things talent.
Sure. And Laura, I just wanted to let you know, I'm really impressed with your progression and how quickly you've moved up to become a leader in growth stage tech. It's not easy, and you've done it very fast, despite, I would assume, probably several obstacles. Really getting your foundation started in the middle of the pandemic must have been very challenging. So just kudos to you. Just shout out real quick for how much you've accomplished in a relatively shorter period of time. It's just really impressive, and I just don't see that type of growth very often.
Thank you. Yeah, no, I appreciate that. I mean, I'm going to be honest, I've been very aggressive in trying to move my career forward. But I think it comes from this place of passion. This is absolutely my calling in life. And yeah, all I want to do is just try and progress and add value where I can. And I've been very lucky with the opportunities that I've been given. So yeah, no, thank you for saying that. Really appreciate it.
Well, I think one of the things that sets you aside is one of the topics, I wanted to discuss with you is really just focusing on not only just candidate experience, but really making sure the human element of talent acquisition is front and center for recruiters. And I know that's a topic that's really important to you. Would you mind just telling us a little bit about that and how you, not only just like from a strategic big picture perspective, but how you go about implementing that on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, recruitment is humans helping humans, right? It's a wonderful thing. I think it is such a fun job. And I think that sometimes people can forget about the fact that, we're all just trying to kind of help each other. So yeah, I mean, the reason I think it's so important is really because of the feedback I've had throughout being my time as a recruiter. I've always approached people in a way that I would want to be approached. I've always been very chill, and just ultimately trying to have a chat. And I started, when I first started in recruitment, I didn't really have any formal training. I was just thrown in at the deep end. And so I just thought, well, how would I prefer to be contacted? How would I want it done? And then I've had a lot of success with this method. And I think that's one of the reasons I have progressed quickly, because I do things quote unquote differently, but I think it is the way that it always should be done. So we're dealing with people's careers. It's a really, really important part of people's lives, and you can't take that for granted. And you can't in any way treat people in a way that you making the hire is more important than their career and their livelihood. So I think that coming from that angle has really helped me. I've built really strong connections off the back of it. And like I said, I think that has been one of the things that has driven my career. And the thing is, that's what makes recruitment joyful. I think meeting other people, building strong connections. And really, if you get to know someone on a personal level, you will be better at your job, because you will know what environments they will suit. You will know what kind of roles are going to, be appealing to them. And then you're better able to place people, in an environment where they're going to thrive. And I think, again, that's probably one of my biggest skills, in recruitment. So not sure if that answered your question entirely, but it's always how I've done it. I imagine that it probably isn't in line with most traditional recruitment training, but I could not be more grateful for the fact that I never had that traditional training.
Right. I mean, I think so. In the early days when I started off in recruiting, I actually started off on the agency side as well.
Mm,
And I think you can be a great recruiter coming from several different backgrounds, whether in-house or agency side.
yeah,
I do
totally.
think one of the advantages of coming from agency side is that it does create this like sales bent attitude when it comes to metrics and holding yourself accountable and driving results in the short term and really just push, which I think is good. But I think a lot of the times what's lost in those environments is the human element. And
Yeah.
most of the training that at least I received starting out was more so on negotiating salaries.
Yeah. No,
Totally honest, negotiating salaries down, right?
yeah. Oh my gosh, no, honestly,
right.
same. It was not so much training, but just like being pushed to do that.
Right.
Or, that being the main concern, bums on seats, getting people in quickly. It was also money motivated. And the thing is, don't get me wrong, I was money motivated. I wanted to make my commission, but I cared much more about the people. And that's why I transitioned in-house, to be honest with you, because, I think that if I had worked for an agency where really the focus was the people, and you're seeing so much more of that nowadays, especially with the RPO companies that are popping up a lot as well. I probably would have stayed in agency a lot longer, but I didn't have that experience, and so I wanted to focus on the people and focus on impacting people's lives positively, on helping businesses grow, especially during such a difficult time during the pandemic. Like that was my focus. I didn't really care about the money. I just wanted to make a decent living doing what I loved, basically.
Sure. Yeah, I think it's I mean, obviously like money is an important motivator, but it's certainly, when you get to a certain point of stability in your life, right, where the essentials are taken care of, right?
Yeah.
We have the luxury of starting to think about, okay, but what now, right? Like what's going to be what does my career mean, right? What's the impact I'm making mean to me, and what types of relationships are we going to build? And I think for a lot of people, the pandemic really was a course correction on values. And I think
100%.
Yeah, people started to really slow down and think about, okay, like what about like the relationships I'm building? And even coming out of the pandemic, I mean, just with the understanding of like, okay, yeah, like obviously I want to make more money, and that to some extent can operate as a yardstick for my progress, but people are not looking at that as like the sole indicator of success anymore. It's no longer like I'm successful if I make this much money, this is my title, right? And this is like the brand name that I work for or whatever, right? It's not that those things, I'm not saying that they don't matter at all. I think there's some people that might argue like it's gone the other end. I still think that stuff it's okay to want those things. But also I think, people are looking at success as being something a lot more holistic and deeper. And when it comes to our health, right, and our relationships and our impact, those seem to be, for a lot of candidates that we're speaking with, those seem to matter a lot more. I mean, they're still looking at salary, obviously, but they're not going to accept a position. I mean, assuming they're making a fair amount of money already. Obviously, if somebody's making 30 grand and they have an opportunity to make 100 grand, they're probably going to say, I'll do it regardless of if it aligns with some of my other values. But if somebody's making, let's say 70 grand and they have the opportunity to make 80, 85, right? They might say, well, you know what? Leave the money. This is where I feel like I can make the best impact and the strongest relationships and have the best experience. And that's what I'm going to do.
Yeah. And then, if you really hit it lucky, you'll find kind of all of that in one place. And I think that, I think that nowadays, in order to be the most successful that you can be you an individual or a company, putting your people at the heart of everything and treating people incredibly well, and being human in everything you do is actually really going to help you probably be more successful. And nowadays, when you think about the rise of the personal brand on LinkedIn, I mean, I just cannot get away from it. And it's a good thing. I love that people are being educated on the power of building a really authentic personal brand and how that can drive success for yourself. I mean, for your organization as well. I mean, I don't want to go off on a tangent around personal branding, but the unbelievable power of like people in your team if you recruit for a business, you know, posting about their positive experiences on LinkedIn and creating a buzz like that, you know, it's unbelievable. So yeah, I think that if you do humanize everything you do from a personal perspective, you know, if a company does that as well, you're almost, okay, I'm not going to say you're not going to fail, but you know, you're setting yourself up for success. And I think that one company that does that incredibly well is my old company, Reach Desk, who attract incredible people because they are an incredible company to work for, have a great culture, and you know, that's enabling them to grow incredibly quickly, because they are putting people at the heart of everything they do.
Yeah, for sure. I agree with you on LinkedIn side side of the house too, because we post a lot of content on LinkedIn, and we've made several hires this year from the relationships that we've built on LinkedIn, and it has been like one of the many drivers that we have to attract recruiters to come to our team, and it's been pretty helpful for us, and also for just awareness, client acquisition across the board. It just seems to be really good in multiple ways. So we're definitely in alignment there, definitely in alignment when it comes to putting people first and creating great experiences. And I think just to kind of circle back to say just one more thing in regards to, you know, the training that recruiters are receiving. I think that when they're starting out, there definitely should be a bigger emphasis on that human element, because it's not just about it being a core value of maybe people similar to us, but the reality is that it does drive better hiring outcomes.
Oh my God. Yeah. I mean, if you don't spend more than 50% of your initial screen call with a candidate, like, I don't like to say selling the company or like, but really working through the elements of the company and the role that align well with that person that you're speaking to, and really like making it a personalized human experience for them, you are, you know, you're shooting yourself in the foot. You know, that kind of excitement that you can build in that first call, you know, that it's just so important. And I think that, you know, gone are the days where you get on a recruiter call and they're just, you know, buffeting questions at you and, you know, just treating you like another number, because it's, you know, it's just not going to work. People are too wise to it now.
And I think it probably in the early days, I remember sometimes I would even catch myself, to be completely honest, if I was back to back 8 calls in a row, you know, probably were some of the times I started to sound a little robotic, and then I kind of had to do a pulse check of like, okay, you know, let's get back on track here. We need to be more engaged. I need to be, you know, I had to basically talking to myself saying, okay, you kind of slow down a little bit. Don't talk quite so fast, really slow down, learn, pay attention, and add that, you know, re-engage on that human element side, because I think partially some of the reason that happens is that a lot of recruiters are working, quite honestly, well above the capacity that they should be, right? They're short staffed. They don't have enough resources, right? A lot of companies, particularly in tech, really see recruiting as a transactional motion and don't want to make the investment that they really have to get the best possible results. And so you usually have a very small team of recruiters that are on the verge of essentially burnout. And so I think that's one of those elements to creating great human experiences starts with creating them for your employees.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right?
Honestly, I could talk till the cows come home about, you know, what I consider to be the proper structure of a talent team, because, you know, I think that if you're not giving your people the time to be able to build these connections, which are ultimately going to lead to your talent department being very, very effective, then, you know, this is one thing that I'm trying to do in my new role at Streetbees. You know, it's about making sure that before we're running away trying to hire people and run processes, that we're actually doing things right from the get-go, and, you know, treating people really well from the get-go, and making sure people have enough time. I mean, in an ideal world, I think that talent departments should be kind of divided into 3 sections. You have a kind of a nurture team, you have an attraction team, and an acquisition team. And 2 of those teams, in my ideal talent acquisition department, if I was running that department and had all of this resource, I would have 2 teams dedicated to building relationships, to nurturing, to saying like, look, I want to have a conversation with you purely in order to make this connection, and maybe a role will come up. And I'm sure that a lot of the bigger companies do it like that. I'm not saying that I've reinvented the wheel, but I think that smaller companies should try and invest in a setup similar to that if they can, because it's an investment for the future. If you're a company that wants to scale and you want to be 1,000 heads or more, if you do that from day one, if you have talent at the leadership table, and if you have a department that's built in order to foster real human connection from day one, as soon as you're at 1,000 people, it should be just so easy. You've built so many connections, and you can bring people in a very quick and effective way into roles that are going to really, really excite people. And actually, going even further than that, you might even be able to start building out roles based on these incredible people you've had conversations with, and knowing their skill sets. It's just, it's ultimately a sales job, isn't it? Recruitment, in the sense of, if you're not hiring, I call it hiring like a BDR, if you're not nurturing and you're not, keeping these relationships going, even if nothing has happened right now, you're shooting yourself in the foot.
Yeah, I agree with you. And one thing we're thinking about right now is basically having a separate position at Secure Vision. We don't know exactly what it's going to be called yet. It could be like recruiting ops manager. It could be like recruitment marketing manager. We're not really sure, because it's kind of a combination of several things. And so we're still trying to define it. But basically what I want to do is figure out, what are the top 10 positions that Secure Visions fills for our clients company-wide, product roles, engineering, sales, marketing, whatever the top roles are, and to proactively develop those candidate pools, and then to basically produce tailored, relevant, valuable content for them on an ongoing basis.
Yeah, and absolutely brilliant. I mean, that is the kind of thing that I think if every company has the budget to do something like that, they should. Think of it like, in businesses who are selling, especially in tech, selling a product, they will be churning out so much content that is aligned to the verticals of the people that they're trying to reach. Why would you not do that for talent? Why would you not apply the same techniques of adding value and really, you probably want your content to be more focused around, the company and the kind of value you can add to someone's life, but it's the same thing. And it just blows my mind that more. I mean, I don't get me wrong, I get it, budgets, we would all love to have someone dedicated to building talent pools for us purely like that. Budgets often prevent it, but if you can, recruitment leaders out there, if you do have the ability to do that in your team, do it. It's only going to serve you well, and it's only the reputation of your business will just shoot through the roof if you are providing value without expecting anything back, apart from maybe having a conversation if a role came up.
And one of the other things that we're thinking about doing too is, in addition to, so like this curated content that I was talking about developing for all the top positions, right? We were thinking, I mean, it's not even content in relation to what Secure Vision can offer, what our clients can offer, but really just focused on, what do engineers care about? Like, what questions do they have? Like, what do they like talking about? Like, what kind of content do they consume? And I mean, it might have, like, we could throw like a curated event, for instance, a virtual or in person, probably virtual, I would assume, because everybody's remote, but having these little curated events where there might be like a panel of speakers, like from like VPs of engineering of growth stage tech companies, talking about something that, engineers care about, or same thing with sales leaders. And just obviously all of it would be hosted by Secure Vision. And we're just thinking, like, how valuable and cool would that be? And how interesting of a differentiator would that be for us to do something like that? And I mean, but it really is a full-time job. And
I think there's a possibility of even kind of taking it one step further and, not selling that as a service, but, if you can collect real data points around what genuinely interests and motivates people in different fields, I think that if you can understand people in those fields and know what they're looking for when it comes to a new role or a new company, and you want to attract the top minds in that field, you'll want to be thinking about that kind of thing. So that sounds like an absolutely incredible kind of role that you're thinking about. And I think it would, it's guaranteed to set you apart from other businesses who aren't putting the time into doing that and really understanding the people that they are, the industries they're recruiting in, the people who are in those industries.
Sure. Well, I think just because you mentioned doing something similar, I think more people are starting to think about this. I think,
yeah,
we will, hopefully, I think we're going to start to see. I mean, it's never going to be widely adopted, I don't think. I mean, I think it's going to be like, the 90th percentile organizations are going to do this. Like the companies that are committed to doing talent acquisition, the best way, they're gonna adapt to this. But everybody else, I still think it's going to be kind of a struggle, and we're not probably going to get a buy-in. You're going to see it a little bit more than we're seeing it now, but I still think that for whatever reason, there's just a lot of organizations out there that see recruiting as kind of this transactional light switch, right? They can just flip on and off when they want, and they're not necessarily playing the long game, right? They're thinking in terms of like hiring surge, or they're thinking in terms of 1 quarter from now, or they're just not being as strategic as they probably should be, from our opinion, right? In terms of how they run their talent acquisition department.
I don't understand why people don't. I mean, can you imagine if you had a revenue target and you just deployed your sales team for a quarter and then hit the revenue target and stopped, and that was just it, because we've hit that now, we'll stop. No, it's an ongoing strategic initiative in your business, talent acquisition. Mm-hmm. The people in your business are the ones that do the thing to make you grow. So why would you not be constantly investing in ways to identify, attract, and actually, going further, bring in and retain the best minds? Mm-hmm. It always does blow my mind when you see tech companies specifically, when the sales teams or like the revenue generating org are the messiahs, they are the most important thing, when you forget that talent brought all of those people in most of the time, and talent are the ones that bring in these amazing people who do the amazing thing. So yeah, I hope that more companies do kind of come around and focus on this as early as possible in their growth journey, and continue to do so for the long term, because it will only help them scale.
I agree. And there's two topics that I wanted to dive in with you today. So I want to make sure we have time for that. One thing that I found very interesting about your background is that you became a recruiter, at least from what I could tell on LinkedIn, shortly before the pandemic started. So getting into talent acquisition, it's hard work. Your first year or two it's always hard, but particularly your first year or two in talent acquisition is usually pretty hard. Working on the agency side is pretty hard as well, right? Being an agency recruiter can be pretty hard. So the fact that you were an agency recruiter for the first time in the middle of a pandemic must have been I would assume a pretty challenging time. And I'm curious to learn how that could have possibly shaped your foundation or your perspective on things, and what you learned from that, and how, how it kind of shaped your foundation, and how it impacts the work that you do today.
Yeah, so I've pretty much never known recruiting outside of the pandemic. When I first started, I think it was about 3 months. 3 months. And the thing is, the first 3 months I worked for a really small agency. We didn't have LinkedIn Recruiter. My first 3 months of being a recruiter, before, in the good old days, before LinkedIn capped the number of connection requests you could send, was me sending connection request after connection request after connection request, and just saying to people, are you open to new opportunities? And that was my entire recruitment process. So yeah, I mean, it was weird. I think I've never known it any different. So sometimes it's hard for me to say, well, how different I am as a recruiter now, as it's difficult for me to say how different I am as a recruiter now compared to if I had started pre-pandemic. What I think I was exposed to a lot of was, first of all, a lot of redundancies. That was rife in my first year of recruitment. So I spoke to a lot of people who had their world completely upended, and actually they were feeling really, really negatively about their careers and really kind of struggling. And I think that definitely made me realize, probably much sooner than I would have done, just how impactful a career, someone's job is on their life. That sounds really stupid, but genuinely.
No, it doesn't. It makes a lot of sense. So I think you honestly answered this question in the first topic we discussed today, which is
I did a little bit,
So maybe that's it, right? Like maybe what you learned, right, is the fact that to be truly impactful in what you do is to recognize the influence and how much what you do really matters to the people that you engage with, and to always keep that human element, that people element front and center in every conversation that you're having. And I think that's kind of, in maybe ways, maybe that foundation is what has been one of the several things that has probably propelled you forward to the position that you're in now, right? Because you learned that very early on.
I also developed an absolute abhorrence for companies that treat people like, excuse my language, crap. I absolutely hate it. And I was exposed to so much of it over the pandemic, just like, bye, we're not, I know we in the UK, we were very lucky. We had a furlough scheme, which, was great in terms of keeping people going, but still it was just the way people used to treat their team. I posted a LinkedIn post about it the other day. That was one thing that I was just like, I'm never, ever going to put someone in a position where they're in a company that treats them like rubbish. And I'm going to use my position as a recruiter to get people hopefully out of bad jobs and integrate new ones, or just educate people as to how they should be treated in a role. Honestly, it's one of the things that, again, I don't necessarily think I would have been as passionate about or as aware of had it not been for the pandemic and for hearing people's stories. So yeah, that was one thing that definitely affected it. And also, actually, another thing, I think I realized just how lucky I was to be in the tech industry, to be honest. I think the tech industry is just an incredible industry to be in. Quite a few tech companies continued to grow just for the nature of what they do throughout the pandemic. The opportunities in this industry are incredible. And so another thing that recruiting through the pandemic has kind of taught me is, this industry is incredibly special, and I want to open as many doors as I possibly can, through what I do. And I have, it's been brilliant. I've managed to help so many people transition into tech, and it's been life-changing. And I think that, again, the pandemic in some ways has kind of informed that. I feel very lucky to have started recruiting when I did. I spent on my LinkedIn, it looks like I'm 21, because I unfortunately not, because I don't really have any of my jobs before recruitment, because I was really in and out of really crap jobs. And I didn't have a great time in my 20s. I like to say they were a dumpster fire. So yeah, I don't think I'd be the recruiter I am today unless I had started in the pandemic. So everything happens for a reason. Yeah.
It's a really cool story. And I think the last topic that we're gonna have time for today, and I know we're coming up on time here in about 6 minutes. I wanted to talk to you about, listening in. We get a fair amount of executives, people, leaders, CHROs, business founders, executives. We also get, a fair amount of people that are in staffing recruiting or internal recruiters. And I think there's at least a rather large segment of the listeners that maybe are aspiring to get into talent leadership.
Yeah.
And so I was hoping you could share, I guess maybe to start, like what foundational skill sets you feel like recruiters need to develop in order to take that next step into talent leadership, what's most important, and maybe also just a little bit about what you're learning, right, over the last couple of months. Like maybe there's some things where you thought they were important, but they're not having as big of an impact, and you realize that, okay, the job is really about this thing, right?
Yeah.
That maybe you weren't anticipating. I'm just kind of curious to get your thoughts on what people need to do to get there, and what you need to do to be successful in that type of role.
Yeah, so I think in order to get there, I think you just have to be very self-assured in that, let me start again. I think in order to get there, there's a couple of things I think really helped me. I have always been quite a self-assured person and always been quite confident in my convictions and sharing them. And so I think that, one way that you can mark yourself out as a potential future leader is by rectifying problems that you see and also providing really honest feedback to your more senior stakeholders around where you see improvements can be made, even if that's not your role. I mean, I was an IC at Reach Desk, and a couple of things I did. I redesigned one of our recruitment processes because I noticed it wasn't working. So if you see something that could be improved, don't wait for permission to do it. Just, I say ask for forgiveness, not permission. Now, it's not always possible. You're not always going to be able to, change process. There's always going to be someone whose permission you need in some situations. But, showing that willingness, to get involved in other areas outside of your traditional remit, I think is another thing that kind of marks you out as a potential leader. I genuinely believe that, because of how human I am, I got so much positive feedback from stakeholders and candidates alike that people then want you to be that representative, because you are the first impression of the company at the end of the day. Coming into the role, it is a never-ending to-do list. First of all, it's so exciting being able to build from the ground up. I think, things that I haven't ever had to consider before, like costs and, money, and, that's all brand new and exciting. I think that one of the things that I guess I'm kind of echoing what I've just said, because one of the things that I've really leaned on is my stakeholder management skills and really being able to build strong relationships very quickly. That's really helped me. Not asking for permission. I've just come in and I've changed a lot within my first month, but it needed to be changed. So yeah, and just being really real and being very honest. I think honesty is really important as well. So that was, that's quite a few things, I guess, to boil it down, be authentic, be willing to get involved in things, be willing to go outside of your comfort zone. Trust me, I've never managed anyone before. This role is a big step up for me, but I've dived in because that way you grow. So yeah, I think if anyone's welcome to message me, by the way, about, how to take this next step, more than willing to kind of coach people through it. But like I said, if I was to boil it down, I'd say be human, be authentic, take on things outside your comfort zone, always be willing to take on more things. And if you see something broken, fix it.
Right. And so all very valid points. And I can echo that, because as we're promoting leaders inside my organization, as well as we're helping our clients hire leaders within their organizations, I think everything that you just said is spot on. And there's some other things that I think I could even just share on what I'm seeing for people that want to move up into talent leadership roles. And I have a feeling that a lot of these align with who you are as a person and how you operate too. But I think, again, getting back to the first thing, echoing what you said, people skills, right? In terms of not only in terms of how you engage with candidates on a human level, but how can you engage with your team on a human level? Like in my opinion, one of the traits of a great manager and a great leader is that they know how to operate from a place of high empathy and high standards at the same time. And they can communicate both of those things at the same time. And that can be very difficult to do. And so, can you be the type of leader where you can have very firm conversations in regards to setting expectations, but ensure that the people that you're doing that with really truly feel cared for, and that you're going to deliver on your end of the bargain as a leader to help pull them along with the overall objectives that the company needs to reach. So I think leading with high empathy and high standards at the same time is something that everybody who is interested in getting into leadership should be thinking about and studying. And I think if people have the budget for it, they should consider executive coaching, because a good executive coach can help them fine tune those messaging and the positioning of how to approach certain topics in a way that you can communicate high empathy and high standards at the same time. The other thing that I see is, to some extent, business acumen, which is kind of like a buzzy term, but, having the ability to see beyond the situation right in front of you.
Yeah.
Right. Like you see, like, okay, the blocking and tackling, like these are this is kind of the battle or whatever, the situation that's happening right here, but being able to understand how the greater implication of the decision right in front of you.
Yeah.
Right. And being okay, if we take this course of action, then, 2, 3, 4 steps down the road, XYZ is going to happen.
Yeah.
And I think and it's not like, people say, oh, some people naturally have it or not. I don't know if I necessarily agree with that. I think just exposure and experience people can develop it. Maybe, I guess some people start a little ahead of others, but just being able to see how do decisions impact the individual, but also impact the organization at scale. If you can kind of mentally toggle between the two and see the differences and the nuance there and try to find the best of both worlds, which is not always perfect, but that's a really important skill set.
Yeah.
And then the last thing I'd say,
writing these down because I'm such a new
right.
leader. I'm still very much learning. Every single day is a learning curve. So this is all great advice.
Well, good. I'm glad you like. I mean, this is just stuff that I talk about with my team, and we also talk about say-do ratio. Like especially if you're working with an executive team, your say-do ratio needs to be on point, right? Meaning that if an executive says, "Okay, will this get done?" Your follow-up is like, yep, I've already added it to monday.com. This is the date it's going to be done. And the leader can expect that if you said you're going to do it, it's going to get done, with the caveat of also having the skill set to say no. If you're at full capacity, understanding capacity is important too, because if you don't have capacity, then you have to go to the leader proactively and say, look, if you want me to do this now, I'm already at a full plate. So what do you want me to remove from my capacity? And so I can get this done, or I can get started on this in 3 weeks. And I think a lot of people challenge with saying no to executives or to their leadership team because they feel really, they want to prove themselves. They want to do right. They want to accomplish what is expected of them, but they don't understand that somebody who can say no to a leader, that's actually one of the most valuable things an executive can have, is have a team that's like comfortable enough to really speak up. And part of that is the culture that the leaders develop. But I think it's just something
I was about to say, like, I mean,
it depends on the culture, right?
Yeah. And the best leaders will have that culture of openness and feedback. I mean, like I said, I've got one direct report at the moment, and I think, I'm asking him for feedback every single time I speak to him. And, I'm making sure that, I'm making sure that, I'm looking after him, because that's ultimately your role as a leader, is to empower and set your team up for success. You are in some ways irrelevant, right? So yeah, no, that is all absolutely stellar advice, and it's definitely something I'm going to be thinking about kind of as I continue in my leadership journey, and just trying to be the best I can be. And but also, actually, I think another major thing for a leader, correct me if I'm wrong if you disagree, but I think being able to be very open about where they've made mistakes and where they are still learning and where they're not perfect, that is crucial as well, because there's just nothing worse than a leader who thinks they know everything, because nobody knows everything. And in fact, hiring your team, you should be hiring people who are better at you than everything that you aren't very good at. And that's how you build a very, very robust, team that's going to help drive significant growth, so fab, great advice.
The way just to kind of continue to kind of echo what you just said, it's like getting to the point where you can help your team avoid falling in the holes that you fell in, right? Like you've been through it. And so it's like, how do you, through onboarding, learning and development, process playbooks, how can you develop kind of the knowledge infrastructure to help them avoid some of the mistakes that you made, right? Because I see that as one of the core value adds that I can bring to my team, is that I pretty much made every massive mistake you can possibly make, starting off as a recruiter and a recruiting manager and leader, just because we did build the company from the ground up, right? We didn't have any of those process or experiences previously. So, it helps hopefully accelerate the learning curve from the team, right? When they can learn from somebody else's mistakes and successes, right? Obviously you got to go through the wins too and discuss what works. So
no, exactly.
Yeah. That's exciting stuff. Well, yeah, I think this is really valuable. And again, I think a lot of people are gonna be able to learn a lot from what you've accomplished and the topics that we've discussed today. And we're actually running over time a little bit, so I think we probably should jump off. But yeah, this was a ton of fun. And Laura, I hope we can continue the conversation sometime soon. And please
Yeah.
keep us posted with your progress and success. We'd love to hear about it.
No, definitely. Maybe I'll have to come back on and do an update once I'm a little bit more seasoned in my leadership role. But look, thank you so much for having me. Your insights have been incredibly valuable. And yeah, I wish you every success with the podcast and with the business as a whole. And yeah, let's keep in touch.
Yeah, let's do it. And Laura, just real quick, where can people find you online if they want to follow your content and see what you're up to?
Oh, I pretty much only have LinkedIn, actually. I was
Okay.
thinking of making a Twitter. But yeah, so my LinkedIn, you can find me if you just type my name in. I've got a profile picture with a bright yellow background and me laughing that my friend took in London after he just told me a joke. So yeah, but I mean, it's just linkedin.com/in/Laura Holcombe, and Holcombe is spelled HOLCOMBE.
Perfect. Well, thank you again, Laura, and to everybody else tuning in. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks. Bye.